Okay, so today we will discuss in the unit 4, there is another topic which is related with the risk analysis of the food additive. So you already know what is the food additive. So in the last semester you have studied this food additive course. So in the food additive, you know, there is one expertise which is a Codex body which is known as your JECFA. It is also known as a Joint Expert Committee on the Food Additives. So there are five committees under the food additives. Okay, I will remind you what are those 5 committees. So there are 5 committees under the CAC, which is your Codex Alimentation Commission. So these are your JECFA, which is your Joint Expert Committee in Food Additive. Then there is a JEMNU. It is Joint Expert Meeting on the Nutritional Unit. Then there is a JEMPER. It is Joint Expert Meeting on the Risk Analysis. Okay, and there is also one for the pesticide residue. Okay, so these are the 4-5 committees which are the expertise committee of the Codex Alimentation Commission, and we will try to understand one of them, which is your JECFA, because today we are going to analyze the risk analysis in the food safety. So as you know, what are the risk assessment, what is the risk management, and the risk communication. So all those things we have discussed and deliberately in the unit 3, and also we have taken certain examples associated with it. So let's begin with the JECFA, what exactly the JECFA is. So you know, there is a Codex Alimentation Commission, which is a joint expert body of the Food Agriculture Organization and World Health Organization. So in 1962 they came up with the criteria of food safety, and this is the one of the product which you know, Codex Alimentation Commission and Codex text, which are the standards. And what they have like defined, they have defined the contaminants and natural occurring. So there are more than 40 of these kind of the contaminants, and it is the joint expert of the committee on the food additives, so JECFA. So there are more than 2,500 food additives. Out of them, more than 40 comes under the category of the contaminants and naturally occurring toxic, and greater than 90 comes under the veterinary drugs and the residue. Okay, so veterinary drugs, as the name is suggesting, it is associated with the animals, it is associated with the pesticide residue, MRL, which is your maximum residue limits. So let's try to understand and figure out what exactly the Codex Alimentation Commission consists of. So we have already know the structure of the Codex Alimentation Commission from the unit 1st. In the unit 1st we have understood how it is organized, how there are different kind of the committees, like there is a Codex Secretariat Committee, there is a there is a horizontal committee, there is a vertical committee, there is an intergovernmental panel, there are ad hoc committees, and there is a secretariat, and all these comes under expertise committees. So there are 8-9 committees just comes under the Codex Alimentation Commission. Out of them, there is a one executive committee and there is a Codex Secretariat. Okay, so in the executive committee you will find committee on the general subject, and there is a committee on the commodity. So commodity under the general subject comes under the horizontal committee, and this is going to be your vertical committee. So horizontal and vertical committee. Now let's try to understand what exactly the general committee on the general subjects. So as the name is suggesting, it consists of the general subject which is more related, which is more oriented towards the good hygiene practice, good manufacturing practice, and there are certain jewelries, policies, and all those things which comes under the sanitary and the phytosanitary kind of the things. So let's try to understand one by one. So there is a general principal committee, then there is a food labeling committee. Under the heading of the food labeling committee, you will find out there are TBT and SPS. TBT is your technical barrier for trade, and second is your SPS, which is your sanitary and phytosanitary. So both the things under the TRIPS and the SPS, which is particularly oriented with the import and the export of the item from one country to another country, and it is more specific with India, because India comes under the category of the developing country, and whenever it has to export in the developed country, let's say it is a European Union, then there are the certain norms which has to be placed in front of the exporters. Then there are contaminants, Then there is a one additive. So today we will try to look out what are the committees which are looking after the additives and what are those committees responsible for it. So there is a one committee known as your Codex Committee on the Food Additive. It is also known as your CCFA. So there are so many committees. It is on the food additive, it is on the hygiene practice, Codex Committee on the hygiene practice, Codex Committee on sanitary measures. So we will not discuss all those committees, but we have to understand only CCFA for the time point being now. Okay, that is my concern. Now coming to the another thing, which is your commodity committee. So it is not our matter of concern for now, because it has also the different committees and the different way, like milk and milk products. So in India there is a milk and milk product order which is your 1992. Okay, so there are fruits and vegetable product, FPO is also there in India. It is passed in 1952. Then there is a fats and vegetable oil, it's passed into 1988 in our country. Then there are chocolates and fisheries all. So they are going to be in the commodity of the vertical committee, but we are not going to discuss that, and because that is not the part of our topic for time being now. Let's try to understand and focus on the CCFA. So Codex Committee on the Food Additive, how it is going to coordinate with the Codex Alimentation and with the FAO WHO member states. Let's try to figure out it. So if the Codex Committee is there and another side FAO WHO members is there, there are the issues of the priorities, and it is going to call for the data, and the data has to be collected from the JECFA meeting. JECFA is your Joint Expert Committee on the Food Additive. Then further it is going to publish the data which is authentic, which has a certain scientific knowledge, which has certain legal and the logical authentications, and where there are certain institutions which are responsible for publishing and which are responsible give the crediting or the ratings agencies. So where are the inputs the JECFA meeting is getting? So it is getting the inputs from the experts, and these experts can be institutionals, academic, researchers, industrial people, then your government bodies, etc. I'm not going into that detail, but India is one of the member where the NCCOP, which is your National Codex Contact Point, which is FSSAI in the Delhi, one of the expert member, one of the meeting has to be attended by the NCCOP Delhi. Then another part is your guidelines. So whatever the standards set, they have to use as a reference, and these references has to be used as a publication. If these publications are founding to be authentic, then they are further going to be in the guidelines channel. Okay, so this is the like one of the input they are getting from the guidelines. So they are getting the input from database, from guidelines, from the experts, and finally it is discussed as a brainstorming session in the JECFA meeting. Then further it is going to be published. So you can find out the JECFA meeting is one of the center, one of the core center of the area, and they are not taking the inputs from the one body, they are taking the inputs from the multi-dimensional institutions, multi-dimensional aspect. So that is the beautification of this JECFA meeting. So let's try to understand how we are going to assess as a risk assessment. Okay, till now we have understand the organization, till now we have understand what are the organizations which are responsible for taking the inputs. Now we will try to understand how the risk assessment process will going to start for the food additive. So it comes under the JECFA evaluation. This is the process which is given by the Joint Expert Committee on the Food Additive. Now FAO chemical evaluation, how it is going to be started? Specification of the identity and the purity. So there are certain methods of the analysis through which they are going to understand what is the purity level. It must be greater than 99.9%, and there are certain instruments which are responsible to knowing the purity level. For example, there are instruments like HPLC, which is your high performance liquid chromatography. Then there are GC, gas chromatography, and there are certain detectors like GCMS which are more famous. to know the purity level at the ppm or ppb level. So they will give you the accuracy at a very higher level. So that is the one of the thing we have to understand, we have to identify that, then we have to go for purity. In the purity also you can you can try to understand and you can try to locate certain other parameters like your acceptable daily intake, tolerable weekly intake. Okay, so these are the certain other parameters which can be evaluated at this stage. The next is your ADI and other guidelines value for the qualitative and the health risk. So we are going to calculate this ADI because just we wanted to know the health risk, whether the health risk is there or not from this particular food additive or not. So we have to know the certain things at this stage of the time. We have to identify, we have to go for the purity level through the analytical labs, through the referral labs, whatever the lab have assigned it by the Codex Alimentation Commission, the sample will go there and they will have certain analytical tests. Those analytical tests will consist of your HPLC, GC and MS, and they will give you certain ADI and TDI value. So next steps come from the WHO toxicological evaluation. So this is the exposure study. So we have already understood what is the exposure study. In the exposure study we are going to take the responsible with the amount. Okay, so we are going to evaluate the what is exactly the LD50, what is ED, what is TDI. So these terms we have already discussed and we have already understood what is the effective dose, what is the tolerable dose, what is your LD50, what is IC30 and what is NOACL, what is no observed adverse effect level. So we have all understand from the exposure study. In the exposure study we generally evaluate with the help of the animal in the second stage, and in the third stage we are going to utilize the clinical or the human trials. So now you can have a big picture how the risk assessment has to be done. Now what are the other things which we have to consider while evaluating, while doing the risk assessment? Okay, so aspect of the JECFA evaluation. So these are your specifications. In the specifications they have to identify and purity level, they have to find out what exactly the purity level is there. So already discussed, it should be more than 99.9%, and they have certain analytical techniques. These analytical techniques I already discussed, like your HPLC, other chromatography technique like GCMS, okay, like FTIR. Okay, so these are the certain techniques which they can do for the, like FTIR is one of the famous for the functional groups. Okay, then reports of the toxicological and monographs. So whenever we are going for the reports we have to get an idea about the ADI, and we will get an idea of the not specific ADI. So that is the thing, means from this we have to get two things. One is your ADI and second is your analytical labs report. Now Codex on the food additives. So this is your main body, which is your Codex committee on the food additive. It is one of the committee, and this committee comes under the horizontal committee, and it establishes the maximum usage level for the individual and the food additives. Various food categories, only the food additives endorsed by the JECFA, and no appreciable health risk are there considered in the CCFA. So there is a no appreciable health risk, and CCFA standards, also called as the General Standard on Food Additive, GSFA, which is a single authority and reference point for the food additive use. So whenever somebody wanted to know any new food additive risk analysis, then they have to go through the report of the GSFA, and GSFA will give you idea about the new food additive. Okay, so this is one of the body which will give the idea of the new food additives, and it comes under the Codex committee on food additives. So that is one of the expertise committee, under that this body comes. Now what is the process? So let's try to understand the process. There is a technological necessity, because if a new food additive is coming, then they have to go for the new things. They have to analyze from the new perspective, from the health perspective of the human, from the environment perspective effective, then it requests for the consideration into the government, and then government is going to the Codex Committee on the Food Additives, and members are appointed by the member nations. So you know there are more than 180 member nations, and the request is for the consideration goes to the JECFA, which is your Joint Expert Committee on Food Additive, and WHO. And JECFA has two centers. One is your Rome, second is your Geneva. It is made up of the two body. So one time it is Rome, because Rome is the capital, Italy. Then it is going to WHO, and one time in Geneva. So these are the headquarters, two headquarters of Codex Alimentation Commission. So they will take the inputs from both the sides. Inputs from both side. Okay, so this all comes under the risk assessment, and this all comes under the risk management. So here you can try to understand how the risk assessment and risk management is going to be happen. Risk management is more coming from the input from the government side, managing the risk in the government, and risk assessment basically has to be taken place at the JECFA level, which is the expert committee. So it is more scientific oriented, it is more management oriented. Now what are the parameters which we have to evaluate during it? It is very important. So I'll already told there is one parameter ADI, then second is your no observed effect level, or NOEL. We have already discussed what is NOEL, but for the sake of the revision, I will tell what is NOEL. If it is an effective dose curve, okay, let's say if it is ED and it is TD, tolerable depth, and it is, let's say, your LD 50, you will find this is the point where no observed effect level is there. Means at this point, when the theoretical point, when there is a no effect on our body, that is known as NOEL. So we have to know the ADI. ADI is your amount of considered to be safe for the consumption of the everyday over the lifetime without adverse effect. So you have the definition of the ADI, which is here, and you have the definition of the NOEL, which is here. Okay, so apply safety factors for the account. So this is the thing. Now how to calculate this NOEL, this all calculation we have studied already. Okay, so I'm not going into that detail. ADI is your mg kilogram per day, and NOEL divided by the 100 to give you the ADI. So once you know the NOEL, then you are in a position to know this thing. Now NOEL is equal to 100 into ADI. So you can find out the range of the NOEL. If NOEL this one, then ADI would be like this. So acceptable daily intake is a very smaller part of the NOEL. So this much it is low. Okay. So thank you guys. Now we will move for the next thing. Okay, so this topic I will take a slight revision of this topic. Okay, so that you can have idea. So first of all, we have discussed like what is the JECFA. JECFA is your joint expert committee of the two expert committees of the Codex Alimentation Commission. Then we have discussed what is the committees of the general subject, what are the committees, commodity committee. So one is your horizontal, one is your vertical committee, but we have to focus on the Codex Commission on the food additive, which is one of the core expert committee of the general subject committee. Okay, so here we will find out the input from the JECFA meeting has to be getting from the data, from the guidelines, from the expert, and then the final publications is there after the risk assessment. Then JECFA evaluation is there. So how the JECFA evaluation takes place with the help of the FAO and WHO. So this is all we have understood. Okay, and finally we have understood how much the ADI is shorter from the other element, and particularly with the relation of the NOEL. Okay class, thank you so much.